Chapter 23 of the Enchanted Barn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Mattern. The Enchanted Barn by Grace Livingston Hill. Chapter 23. The next trolley that passed the old barn after the Hollisters had left brought a maidservant and a manservant from the Graham place. The other old servant met them, and together the three went to work. They had brought with them a lot of large dust covers and floor spreads, such as are used by housemaids in cleaning a room, and with these they now proceeded to cover all the large pieces of furniture in the place. In a very short space of time the rugs and bits of carpet were carefully rolled up, the furniture piled in small compass in the middle of the rooms, and everything enveloped in thick coverings. The curtains, bric-a-brac, and even the dishes were put away carefully, and the whole big, inviting home was suddenly denuded. The clothes from the calico curtain clothes presses were folded and laid in drawers, and everything made perfectly safe for a lot of workmen to come into the house. Even the hayloft bedrooms shared in this process. Only a cot was left for the old servant, and a few necessary things for him to use, and most of these he transported to the basement, out of the way. When the work was done, the man and maid took the trolley back home again, and the other old manservant arranged to make his Sabbath as pleasant as possible in the company of his brother from the nearby farm. Monday morning, promptly at 8 o'clock, the trolley landed a bevy of workmen, carpenters, plasterers, plumbers, and furnace men, with a foreman who set them all at work as if it were a puzzle he had studied out and memorized the solution. In a short time the quiet spot was full of sound, the symphony of industry, the rhythm of toil. Some men were working away with the furnace that had been stored in the cellar. Others were measuring, fitting, cutting holes for lead pipes. Still others were sawing away at the roof, making great gashes in its mossy extent, and two men were busy taking down the old barn door. Out in front more men were building a vat for mortar and opening bags of lime and sand that began to arrive. Three men with curious aprons made of ticking, filled with thin wire nails, were frantically putting lathes on the uprights that the carpenters had already set up, and stabbing them with nails from a seemingly inexhaustible supply in their mouths. It was as if they had all engaged to build the Tower of Babel in a day, and meant to win a prize at it. Such sounds! Such shoutings, such bangings, thumpings, and harsh, raucous noises! The bird in the tall tree looked and shivered, thankful that her brood were well away on their wings before all this cataclysm came to pass. Presently arrived a load of sashes, doors, and wooden frames, and another load of lumber. Things can be done in a hurry if you have money and influence and the will to insist upon what you want. Before night there was a good start made toward big changes in the old barn. Plumbers and gas fitters and men who were putting in the hot water heat chased one another around the place, each man seeking to get his pipes in place before the lathers got to that spot, and the contractor was everywhere, proving his right to be selected for this rush job. As soon as the lathers had finished with a room, the plasterers took possession, and the old door was rapidly being replaced with a great glazed door set in a frame of more sashes, so that the old darkness was gone entirely. In the roof, big dormer windows were taking the place of the two or three little eyebrow affairs that had given air to the hay heretofore, and the loft was fast becoming pleasanter than the floor below. Outside laborers were busy building up a terrace, where a wide cement floor piazza with stone foundations and low stone walls was to run across the entire front. Another chimney was rising from the region of the kitchen. A white enamel sink with a wide drain shelf attached appeared next, with signs of a butler's pantry between kitchen and dining room. A delightful set of china closet doors with little diamond panes that matched the windows was put in one corner of the dining room, and some bookcases with sliding doors began to develop along the walls of the living room. Down in the basement a man was fitting stationary tubs for a laundry, and on both the first floor and the second bathrooms were being made. If the place hadn't been so big, the workmen would have got in one another's way. Closets big and little were being put in, and parts of a handsome staircase were lying about, until you wouldn't know the place at all. Every evening the old servant and the neighbor next door, who used to rent the old barn before he built his own new one, came together to look over what had been accomplished during the day, and to discourse upon this changing world and the wonders of it. The farmer, in fact, learned a great deal about modern improvements, and at once set about bringing some of them to bear upon his own modest farmhouse. He had money in the bank, and why shouldn't he have things convenient for Sally? When Sidney Graham reached the city on Monday morning, he scarcely took time to read his mail in the office and give the necessary attention to the day's work before he was up and off again, flying along the Glenside Road as fast as his car would carry him. His mind certainly was not on business that morning. He was as eager as a child to see how work at the old barn was progressing, and the workmen stood small chance of lying down on their job that week, for he meant to make every minute count, no matter how much it cost. He spent a large part of Monday hovering about the old barn, gloating over each new sign of progress, using his imagination on more things than the barn. But when Tuesday arrived, an accumulation of work at the office in connection with a large order that had just come in kept him close to his desk. He had hoped to get away in time to reach Glenside before the workmen left in the afternoon, but 4 o'clock arrived with still a great pile of letters for him to sign before his work would be done for the day. He had just signed his name for the 49th time and laid his pen down with an impatient sigh of relief when the telephone on his desk rang. He hesitated. Should he answer it and be hindered again, or call his secretary and let her attend to it while he slipped away to his well-earned respite? A second insistent ring, however, brought him back to duty, and he reached out and took up the receiver. " Is this Mr. Sidney Graham? Long distance is calling." The young man frowned impatiently and wished he had sent for his secretary. It was probably another tiresome confab on that Chicago matter, and it really wasn't worth the trouble anyway. Then a small scared voice at the other end of the wire spoke. " Is that you, Mr. Graham? Well, this is Carol. Say, Mr. Graham, I'm afraid something awful has happened to Shirley. I don't know what to do, and I thought I'd better ask you." Her voice broke off in a gasp like a sob. A cold chill struck at the young man's heart, and a vision of Shirley battling with the ocean waves was instantly conjured up. " Shirley? Where is she? Tell me quick !" he managed to say, though the words seemed to stick in his throat. " She's down at Washington," answered Carol. " Mr. Barnard phoned her last night. There was something special nobody else could take notes about, because it was for a government contract and has to be secret. Mr. Barnard asked her to please go, and she went this morning. Mother didn't like her to go, but she addressed a lot of postal cards for her to write back, and one came postmarked Baltimore in this afternoon's mail, saying she was having a nice time. But just now a call came for mother to go to the telephone. She was asleep and George was crabbing, so I had to come. It was a strange man in Washington. He said he had just found 3 postal cards on the road addressed to mother that all said, 'Help, quick. 2 men were carrying off Shirley and please to phone to the police.' He took the postals to the police station, but he thought he ought to phone us. And, oh, Mr. Graham, what shall I do? I can't tell mother. It will kill her. And how can we help Shirley?" " Don't tell mother," said Graham quickly, trying to speak calmly out of his horror. " Be a brave girl, Carol. A great deal depends on you just now. Have you phoned Mr. Barnard? Oh, you say he's in Washington? He was to meet your sister in Baltimore? He did meet her, you say? The postal card said she had met him? Well, the next thing is to phone Mr. Clegg and find out if he knows anything. I'll do that at once, and unless he has heard that she is all right, I will start for Washington on the next train. Suppose you stay right where you are till 5:30. I may want to call you up again and need you in a hurry. Then you go back to the cottage as fast as you can and talk cheerfully. Say you went to take a walk. Isn't Elizabeth with you? Well, tell her to help keep your mother from suspecting anything. Above all things, don't cry. It won't do any good, and it may do lots of harm. Get George off by himself and tell him everything, and tell him I said he was to make some excuse to go downtown after supper and stay at the telephone office till 10 o'clock. I may want to call him up from Washington. Now be a brave little girl. I suspect your sister Shirley would tell you to pray. Good bye." " I will," gasped Carol. " Good bye." Graham pressed his foot on the bell under his desk and reached out to slam his desk drawer shut and put away his papers. His secretary appeared at the door. " Get me Barnard and Clegg on the phone. Ask for Mr. Barnard, or if he isn't in, Mr. Clegg. Then go out to the other phone and call up the station. Find out what's the next express to Washington. Tell Bromwell to be